Okay, a little bit on patience. Gardening is a slow hobby. It operates on a seasonal schedule, and gardening is definitely about delayed gratification. Gardens take time to develop as your vision clarifies and changes, as your soil improves, and as perennials grow to larger sizes. For instance, if you put in a row of new fruit trees, when you initially plant them, you head them off to maybe 18 to 20 inches high, and this brand new fruit tree just looks like a stick sticking out of the ground. You're going to have a row of sticks, and you're not going to have fruit hanging off the trees in a few days. It's going to take probably 3 years before you're bearing the first fruits. In that first 3 years, you're going to be developing the structure of the tree. You're going to be developing the scaffolds, and then after that, you can allow it to start fruiting. And you may not get full production until 6 years in. So that's definitely delayed gratification. If you're a very impatient person or are very busy, you may want to use more perennials than annuals and biennials. I would say the more perennials you use, the higher the proportion of perennials you use, the less active of a gardener you're going to need to be. Okay, part of your routine. A successful garden is part of the gardener's routine, either daily routine or weekly routine or whatever, but it's a part of their routine. Gardeners should be going in their garden, checking for weeds, checking for proper growth, checking for pests and diseases. Your garden is something that is a joy to stroll in over morning coffee or after work in the afternoon or early evening when it's cool, to walk through with a cool drink, to put a chair in your garden and sit among the plants and just relax in the shade. These are wonderful experiences, and if they become part of your routine, you'll be a more successful, happy gardener. A garden is not something you just set up and walk away from and come back in a month and see how things did. It really is not that kind of an experience, in my opinion. For this reason, the closer your garden is to your house, to your front door, the more convenient the garden is to access, the more successful you're going to be as a gardener. You can really make your garden a beautiful place if you add a few extra things like bird feeders. And you can sit and watch hummingbirds if you're in that part of the world. I'm in that part of the world. You can, at night or early evening or early morning, you can smell the fragrance from night blooming species like Nicotiana alata, mirabilis, like 4 o'clocks, also jasmines, plants like the moonflower. So your garden can be an inspirational, beautiful place, even at nighttime. And some of these aromas of these night blooming species are just beautiful and sweet, and a wonderful experience. If you live in a hot region like I do, it's probably best to avoid the middle of the day when it's 105 degrees. Even the healthiest plants are going to wilt under those temperatures and be stressed. And there's no need for you to be in the garden wilting along with the plants. I believe one of the keys to successful gardening is to not get overwhelmed and to not get discouraged. And if you're going in the garden when it's boiling hot, you could get discouraged, and there's no need to get discouraged and uncomfortable. Here's something that people don't do every day: walking barefoot on soil. Maybe little kids are doing it, but adults may not be doing it that much. And it's a very interesting, refreshing experience. So walking barefoot in the garden is another interesting experience, and a good reason to get rid of stones and cockleburs and things like that. Puncture vine. Okay, a master plan. You may have heard that you should always start with a plan and write things down first, and maybe a lot of us don't do that. But it is a really good idea for gardening. You probably have an idea of what you want to do, but as you put forth your hand and create that island paradise, you may see that you want to do things differently, you want to change directions. So it's a really good idea to sit down carefully and think through realistically what your garden is going to be like. How big is it going to be? How many beds you're going to have? The arrangements of the beds, where the plants are going to be located, proximity to a sidewalk, where the plants may get in the way of pedestrians, location of water, how you're going to run your irrigation system if you need that. Some regions don't need irrigation, mine does. Where are your walking paths or aisles going to be? How wide are your beds going to be? What shape are they going to be? Studying light in your garden. Where is the light falling? Where should beds be placed? Where could you put containers like wine barrels or tubs to grow plants in containers? Where could they go? Is there space for that? If you're growing all food, well, you may want to put some flowers and herbs in as well. And where is that going to go? If you're going to do fruit trees or fruiting shrubs, how big do they get when they're mature? How many can you put in a bed or along a border or whatever? How is that going to work? So really, I would, instead of going into the yard and digging a hole and sticking something in the ground, really think about it, write it down, map it out, and just meditate on it for 6 months, a long time. Look at the site, think about it. How is it going to go? How is it going to work before you actually do anything? And talk to other people about it. Talk to your spouse if you have one. Talk to other gardeners. You may find that your next door neighbor knows a lot about plants. Mine does. And they may have some great ideas. So just don't rush into doing anything permanent, particularly things like perennials, particularly woody perennials. Once you put a tree in one location or a shrub, it's pretty difficult to move it. You don't want to be doing that unless you absolutely have to. So take your time. Expect that your plans will change over time. For instance, we all get older and we get less agile, and I have felt that myself. And I want to do a little bit less of annuals and biennials now, and I want to go a little more towards perennials. So what I've been doing in the last year or two is using up garden space for fruit trees or herbs, which require less active gardening, as I mentioned before. So expect that your plans will change. You may get an idea for something completely different, and you want to have the flexibility to change things. Beds can be moved. Irrigation can be moved. Moving trees is much harder, and trees cast shade. So where trees are located will affect what you can do. So you really should think about it and go slow. Bed styles. Raised beds are very popular, and usually raised beds are anywhere from 2 to 4 feet wide. I would say a standard width is probably 4 feet, and the length can be just about anything really. The width, you don't want the width to exceed about 4 feet, because it's very difficult to garden in the center of a wide bed. So that's another thing to think about. If you're in a walking path and you're on your knees working the bed, a narrower bed is easier to work, and that may be something you want to plan, and you may want to reconfigure your beds later on as you have less mobility, and make them 3 feet wide or 2 feet wide or whatever, to make it easier and easier to work. So again, you may have to reconfigure things as time goes on. Raised beds are very popular, and they have typically wooden sides, and they look like a big box. And personally, I do not like that kind of bed. I find it to be very difficult to work properly. It gets in the way of my tools. I'm constantly banging my hands against the wood, banging the tools against the wood. I just find it very difficult to work in a wooden sided bed personally. But don't feel that you have to have a wooden side bed. A lot of people like it. You can just do dirt or soil sided bed only. With sloping sides, you don't have to have anything on the sides of the bed. You can pile the dirt up, make sloping sides, and that's it. And that's what I do. It costs nothing, and there's nothing in the way of the tools. Now, it doesn't look as neat, but if you do a careful job, it looks really good. Another thing you can use are cinder blocks or cement blocks. They are inexpensive. They last basically forever, whereas wood breaks down and needs to be replaced. Cinder blocks absorb water and have kind of a sponge-like effect, help buffer the moisture in the bed a little bit, maybe reduce the edge effect in the bed a little bit. Also, cinder blocks have holes in them, and those holes can be filled with soil, and you can grow things in those holes. It works very well. Cinder blocks are really heavy, and they're not super good looking, but they're not bad either. So people use other things as well. Some people use corrugated metal. There's a whole variety of sides you can use, but remember, you can just do soil. You don't have to have anything there. If you have a lot of space in your garden and you want to grow food, you may want to grow food in rows rather than beds. If you have less space, growing in beds is probably more space efficient, but if you do have the room, growing in rows is useful in certain ways, and it makes planting and weeding and irrigating a bit easier, I would say. So that's another thing to consider if you have unlimited space. Think in modules. Garden beds act like modules. They're discrete, and you can add one and then add another and then add another, or you can remove one and reconfigure it. And that's a good way to approach gardening. You're going to start off small because you don't want to get overwhelmed. I'll talk more about that soon. And beds can be treated as modules. You can add them as needed and grow your garden bed by bed. So I think that's a good way to think about it. Inspiration for your garden plan. Read books, magazines, websites, visit gardens, talk to gardeners. If you know a master gardener, you can talk to them. If there are garden clubs in your area and they're giving talks, those are very useful. Also, there are often talks at libraries. There are seminars at colleges on gardening. Those are all great sources of information. Your neighbors. If you ask around, you're going to probably find that you have neighbors, often older neighbors, that have done a great deal of gardening and know a lot. And they would probably be happy to share what they know. And I personally have learned a lot from my neighbors. They may be older and not doing much gardening anymore, but they've done it in the past and they know what they're doing and they know what works and what doesn't work.